right, everyone, go ahead and take your final seats, and we'll kick off today's panel. I hope everyone had a chance to mingle and get to know one another and grab a drink or two. Following the panel, you'll have plenty of time to do more of that. I'm Hannah Jennings, the event organizer of Tech in Motion, and if you're familiar with Tech in Motion, you know our goal is surrounded bringing the tech community together to share ideas, inspire one another, innovate, and really just foster deep connections and talk about the latest IT topics, which is exactly what we're going to do here today. We are so excited to be back in Atlanta. This is our first in-person event in over 4 years, so we could not be more excited to be back in the community and connecting again. We have an incredible panel here with us today, and they're going to talk about the top emerging data and AI trends. They have a lot of knowledge to share, so thank you all for being here. Before we kick it off to Serena, our moderator, I'm going to welcome Brendan from our founder, Motion Recruitment, to share a little bit more about the state of tech employment. So Brendan, come on up.
Cool. Well, thank you for the round of applause. Definitely didn't need that one. Hannah, great job introducing who Tech in Motion is, right? As she mentioned, my name is Brendan. I'm our director down here, managing director at Motion Recruitment Partners here in Atlanta, right? So we're going to get into a lot of, I think, honestly, really important discussions throughout the night here about data. What does data mean? Everyone here has a different answer to that question, right? Artificial intelligence. What jobs is that going to create, right? What jobs is that going to change? What jobs could that potentially eliminate? Honestly, just being out there for an hour, hour and a half, I've heard a lot of good conversations about the topic, and this panel, I think, is going to do a great job kind of diving into it, right? So just to make sure everyone kind of knows who we are, what we do, right, and to make sure you've all kind of just really seen what we can do to try to help you out. So if you are right now looking for a new job, right, find yourself maybe just generally looking to see, hey, I have a job now, maybe things could improve, right? We have our career booth right out there with Jake and Alex and a couple other folks who will be there throughout the night, right? Also, if you're in the spot where you're like, hey, I need to hire to my team. We're having trouble consistently finding good talent in the Atlanta area, right? We'll be able to help you out with that as well. So I think the obvious question we're gonna get into here, and not to steal everyone's thunder, is what is artificial intelligence going to do in the greater technology workforce, right? In the greater technology workspace? Where is it trending? Where is it going, right? And what is kind of going to be my role into it? So one stat I just want to read to you guys here, and then we'll kick it over to the panel, right? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, demand for data roles is projected to jump 35% in the next decade, right? Just went very silent as I said that. So that could be good, or that could not be good, right? So what does that mean? What is, again, back to the first question, right? Like, where does artificial intelligence factor into that, which these guys will certainly talk about? And literally, like, over the next 5 years, I just talked about a decade, what's going to change in the next 5? What's going to change in the next 2, right? So I'm going to kick it over to the panel, starting off with the moderator, international award-winning technology leader, Serena Sacks-Mandel.
Thank you so much for being here. Is my mic on? Just checking. Okay, cool. Thank you. So I'm Serena Sacks-Mandel. I am from Microsoft, and I'm the global CTO for the education industry. So I work all over the globe with higher ed, with K-12, with ministries of education, research institutions, and academic medical centers. I've been there about 4 years, and prior to that, I was the CIO of Fulton County Schools right here in Georgia, north and south of Atlanta. And I just want to give a shout out to John, because when I was CIO, you guys did a fantastic job finding and helping us get the right resources. So I'm thrilled to be here and highly recommend using this Tech in Motion firm now to either find your next job or to hire your next great person. So little pitch there, okay? Fist bump. Ron?
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Ron Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of a stealth mode AI startup. Basically, we're going to change the game when it comes to how you understand data and analytics when it comes for an executive team at the mid-market level. So more to follow on that. I'm not going to speak too much about it, but I'll probably put a couple pubs in there throughout our conversation. Prior to that, I was an executive at EY, where I led the intelligence and data analytics team as part of the cybersecurity practice. And then before that, I was an executive with the FBI where I oversaw the intelligence program. I was one of the first intelligence executives in the FBI office here in Atlanta. Oversaw the security for the Super Bowl when that was here, which was probably one of the worst Super Bowl games that we probably could all watch.
I was depressed for a while.
And then before that, I got a lot of injuries as a special operations intel officer in the Army. So
Wow.
the things I like to do is like hang out with Ed, who's in the audience here, and ride bikes, and then move dirt around with my tractor, which as a tech guy is something you probably don't hear often.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Victor Montgomery, and I am blessed because I have two jobs. I am Audit Director for State Farm, and I'm also an IT Data Services Director for one of our subsidiaries, Gamesco Insurance. So it's a pretty exciting time right now for me. I'm 2 weeks into this new assignment, so lots of learning, lots of water hose absorbing, but it's a special place. I've been in industry for over 19 and a half years. Majority of that has been in technology, various roles, started in software engineering, migrated to database administration, had ownership of tool support, so you think your SAS, Cognos, Click, and then began migrations over into AWS. This audit gig, which we'll get into here pretty soon, that's changed my perspective on a lot, including AI and ethics. So really excited to be here with all of you. And my free time, I don't have free time.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll transition over to Amit.
All right. My name is Amit Dingare. I'm the Chief AI Officer at a company called PRGX Global. Been in this job just about 2 months now. Prior to this job, I worked at a manufacturing company, a $20 billion manufacturing company in Atlanta, and built a data science team grounds up. Been in this field for 14 years, not 40, right?
1-4. We all thought he said 40,
40.
which we didn't think was possible.
But I started my career as a statistical forecaster, used to do demand forecasting. So kind of like saw before the whole area or the term of data science was there, I was doing statistical learning. And then machine learning came, so made my way into that. Then deep learning came, made my way into that. And now it's all the rage about GenAI. So trying to dabble into that as well. So happy to talk about my journey and talk about learnings that I had along the way.
So as you see, we have a great panel, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation, and it will be a conversation. I think that these AI director, these chief AI officer, these roles are new, but I'm sure we've all been buzzing about generative AI since about November of 2022. But the pace of change has been amazing. It's like head spinning. And we came out of the pandemic, and then we get hit with the AI. And I know all these organizations are trying to figure out, they're either on somewhere on the spectrum from fear to trying to figure out how to harness the power of AI. And that's what we're going to dig into. I do want to piggyback on some of the statistics that Brendan was saying about the technology state for hiring. So I have some data as well. The tech occupation employment is expected to grow at twice the rate of overall employment, twice the rate. So here we are, we're going to talk about AI and what it's doing to employment. The fact is that technology is embedded in every job now. So the need for technology knowledgeable people and AI knowledgeable people is only growing. So even if some jobs may be obsolete because of this technology, high tech is growing. And I was on a panel right after generative AI was announced in New York City with global esteemed people. I was just like blown away. But one of the questions was asked, will AI take my job? And I said, no, but somebody who knows AI will. So we need to know AI, not only that we keep our jobs, but so that we elevate. And the statistics from the Microsoft Workforce Index are showing that hiring leaders would rather hire somebody that knows AI than has an established track record and skill set. So super important. The second statistic I want to add is that the median salary for somebody in technology is almost $105,000 median, which is twice the average of any other industry. So you're in the right place at the right time. And with that, I'm going to start with our first question, and Amit, you'll start, and then we'll let the others, chime in and tell us what you think too. So, top of mind, data and AI trends for 2024 key developments, applications and implications for these technologies. So, we've seen breakneck change. We thought Moore's law was kind of crazy, and we're going way beyond that. It's a hockey stick up. So, it's hard, I know, going out on a limb, even predicting 6 months out. We're saying what's going to happen the rest of 2024 and beyond. So with data and AI.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing, but I'm going to try based on what I'm seeing, right? There are 4 things I'm seeing right now that I think are quite interesting, right? One is, of course, we all heard about the term large language models, right? Now that's changing to something called small language models, specific to a domain, right? So I'm already seeing domain-specific knowledge, the knowledge models or language models coming out, right? And I think there is a lot of focus in that area because I think it's removing some of the issues that we had with the large language models for general business domain applications, right? So that's one thing I'm seeing. The second thing I'm seeing is emergence of virtual agents. This is where the agents can actually do multiple tasks in certain sequence. An example actually I'm working on right now in my fun time is building an agent that can actually make a itinerary planning for you. So it can make a trip planning for you, which includes booking your flights or getting you the flight information, then telling you what flights to choose, then depending on the destination, telling you what things to see. So if you want to go to London, it will tell you, okay, these are the destinations that you want to see, and then organizing hotels around that, right? So I just got the first part done on the airlines part. But I think these agents basically are asynchronous tools. They have the ability to basically explore tools in the web and use those to get information. So right, historically, if you thought about ChatGPT had all the knowledge into it, right? And then it would basically pull that knowledge from its memory. Well, if you think about ChatGPT and give ChatGPT a tool, like say search tool, right? Now it can do a lot more for you. It can understand your language, but then it can do those tasks in real time for you, right? So this emergence of virtual agents is, I think, a fascinating trend. I'm seeing some applications of that at work right now as well. So I would definitely encourage all of you to look into that. The third thing I'm looking at, and I think this is all probably, you all heard about this term called multimodality, where historically, when the ChatGPT came, the focus was only on language. But now these models are going outside of language. Now you're seeing images, you're seeing videos, right? Sound, everything coming into that, and they are all coming together. So I think there are a lot of interesting applications, especially in the movie industry, right? If you think about that, where if you can give a prompt and generate a lot of things together. I think Sora came out about 6 months ago from OpenAI, and it can actually create a small video based on a prompt given, right? And it was very good. So
I heard it was so good that Tyler Perry canceled
he actually canceled his, yes, that's right. He canceled his Atlanta studio actually. He called it, he paused it. So that's where I think you will see like long context videos also coming, because the initial videos that came out were like 2 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
So,
but it's improving.
It's improving, right? I think as with more data, I think, and more compute, you can probably make longer videos as well. So I think that's one trend that I'm watching. And then the final one is connecting actions with the languages, right? Where what I'm seeing right now is the last mile in this whole is how do you connect robotics with AI? And if you can do that, then you can actually really start getting benefit of AI in real world. So I think there have been many startups, you probably have seen that already, videos about that. A lot of that is still hype, but I think there is a lot of effort happening on connecting actions with language. So I think those are the 4 trends that I'm watching.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, Amit, because you touched on something just now with the companies, and what I would say one of the trends, and maybe we have a few people in here that is engaged in it, is a lot of niche or boutique startups that are being generated based on AI. Right. So prior to, the barrier of entry into some of these companies was extremely high, but AI has enabled us, to go out and explore domains that sometimes we're not even skilled at. But we can read a video, or we can listen to a video, take the 4 instructions and see if it really works. So there's a graphic floating around, that's showing how many companies and what domains there are in that have come out of AI since November of 2022.
So many.
It's a tremendous amount. So you're seeing people trying to take advantage of this technology while the iron is hot.
Right, at the moment.
So it's a
and
it's
they
a
won't
pretty
all
beautiful
pan out.
thing. They won't, but you don't know unless you give it a try.
Right.
Agreed.
It's pretty much like .com of AI. It's like that's what you're seeing at this point.
Ron, did you want to say something?
No, so I would say some of the things that you mentioned, one of the terms retrieval augmented generation is what you were referring to when you're able to go and pull information in from the internet to make your AI agent, which we're building. We actually have one that has a specific use case, to your point, on small language models, which to further articulate that is, for us, it allows us to spit out a higher, better quality output. And so one of those trends that you look at now, for anything that's out there, what we call off-the-shelf large language models, the more you use it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
And so, like for us, and a lot of people don't understand that it requires a significant amount of maintenance to keep those at a high quality output. And so for us, like to Amit's point, like we're building on top of some of those and fine tuning them, then also building those smaller large language models to have specific use cases, which I'll talk about more like when we get into some of the other questions. But those trends that are the quality that you're looking at when you get fear about like, oh, well, is this going to take our job? Well, I don't know if that's so much the case, because in order to get those high quality outputs require a lot of compute, which is money, a lot of energy, and then a lot of people still to get those up and running and to maintain those.
And that's what I'm saying, is that we need more AI trained people to keep these models going. A couple things I want to add on is, because I focus on the education industry, and everybody either went to school, knows a kid, or has a kid, right? So everybody knows something about education because you've gotten one. So you probably see that AI tutoring bots are becoming very hot, and what we did is implemented in New York City in the classroom. They went from, we're not going to use ChatGPT, we blocked it, to we're actually using it in the classroom, but with their own content and curriculum. So we help New York City import their content and curriculum so that when a student queries the data, it's accurate because it's from the approved content and curriculum. The other thing that I love about the tutoring bot that New York City did with Microsoft's help is that it doesn't just give the student the answer, it's a conversation. So it's not just like doing a search and getting the answer. It says, so have you thought about this, and where would this, it's like a dialogue back and forth, so the student's actually learning. So it's a true tutoring experience versus giving the student the answer. So that's super cool. And then to transition to the next question, I want to kind of highlight, you're talking about language-enabled robots. Okay, so if that doesn't strike fear in our hearts, like, that's where, there's this chasm between fear of AI and how is it going to change our world, and are we going to be obsolete? Like, what the heck are these going to unleash? We've all seen the science fiction movies. But if we don't move forward, we don't mitigate the risks, and we don't harness it, we're going to be left behind. Our companies, our environments, our regions. So, and I've told people all over the world that if you do not harness the power of AI, if your fear holds you back, that region will actually decline because they won't be able to play on the global stage. So with that, we're going to move into the kind of the ethics and responsible AI. So, oh, sorry, it's Ron that I'm asking.
I was going to pivot to
I know.
I got you.
You guys switched seats, then the order of the question. So data fuel technology and the enterprise. That's what we're talking about. We know that data is the fuel, the food that AI eats to churn out information. It has to have a rich database. But there's the ethics, the biases that could be inherent. We need to have, a diverse algorithm and data to be accurate. So I want to talk about the AI ethics and the potential for AI risks, and how do we even regulate that? I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of tie back to like my history before like I started this company and even before
You're in
UI.
the FBI.
Yeah, from the FBI piece. So objectivity is a core function of the job there, especially working in intelligence. So you want to try to understand what are your biases, what are other people's biases, what is the actual outcomes that you're trying to get, and what's the point you're trying to get across. But one of the other things too is like that's the same thing that goes into like how we develop software. Like I know we have some developers in the audience now, and one of the things like a selfish plug here is like I have a book that's coming out on responsible AI. Me and my CTO Landry, who's on the line now, is a genius that's helping me bring it all together. But one of the things that we focus on in there and some from my previous life is understanding like how do you overcome and recognize your biases. We're not, yeah, you understand like, hey, racial, gender, all those different things. Yes, that matters too. But people have biases that get into code that's just about the color blue or like I don't like to turn left. And so like how do you actually understand and identify that? So you're talking about going back to the people at the root cause of everything. I had a conversation at a tag event where we were discussing, actually he's sitting in the audience now, where he's like, oh, I would like to have an AI president. And then he was like, oh yeah, Keegan. And he was like, oh, well, you know what? Like at that point, it's just going to be learning from itself. Like that's not the case. At the root, what's at the foundation of every single piece of code? People.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you understand and govern through that? So like, we talk about AI governance and responsible AI. Like the foundation of it is like understanding who do you have in your team. It's not just like you all look different, because you still can get to a point of what we call groupthink, but then you have to have these purposeful exercises that we talk about in the book, which is like, everybody knows about red teaming, having some of those tough discussions and putting it out there on the table, and then coming up with a plan to mitigate that. But then once you mitigate it, you gotta always continue to check for it. So we talked about like AI is like, oh, there's still a people piece of it. And so that validation and governance process throughout is always continuous. So in order to get a high output, you got to always be validating that. That's one of the techniques of human in the loop or user in the loop. Yep. Like for us, we practice human in the loop extreme because we're always validating that. For us to get to from a 60 or 70% accuracy output, we got to always be validating that. So we're trying to get to 80%, 90% is ideal, which is going to be extremely hard. You would know the best out of that. But for us, like, it comes down to really, just to sum it up, is governance. So starting at like, well, how do you mitigate those risks? There's a substantial amount of risk that comes with that, because right now the speed to market, like we were talking about AI startups, I'm one of those, but hey, we're here for the long run. Like we're not a fly-by-night company. And so, but really it's about how do you establish a governance program? How do you validate that continuously? Because once you build it, as soon as you put it out there, even in your own domain within your business, the worse it gets. So those risks are from a governance standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, but responsible AI, I know we discussed this in the pre-meeting, is also includes security. I know I'm talking a lot right now, I'm pretty passionate about this, but people forget about the security aspect of it, the cybersecurity aspect of it, because what's at the root cause of it is like just people, is data. So data security is also one of the biggest factors and vulnerabilities when it comes to, like you guys have seen probably like large language model hijacking. Like you get in there and you ingest some bad code into that.
Jailbreaking that.
Yep.
Jailbreaking,
yeah. There's like a jailbreaking one now that's like somebody's boyfriend named Dan in some country. And so like, yeah, so those things like security, I understand the ethics behind it, but don't forget, like there's some core things that we've already been doing that we learned from the cybersecurity phase of our lives that apply to like how we establish and mitigate those risks when it comes to responsible AI, or just building it the right way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and there's a certain curiosity that comes along with this. And when I think about the ethical side of AI, you know, it's really a separation of personal versus corporate, right? So personally, you can go out and do particular things with AI models that's not impacting the world. But corporately, when you go out and you begin to buy models from other people, third-party models, and you incorporate that or you ingest that into your systems, well, now you're accountable for how they develop those models, right? And so the term I love to use is prove it, right? So if someone came to my organization and said there was bias in how we made a decision, right, we have to prove that there wasn't bias in it. And because these models are black boxes and we're buying it from third parties many times, you don't know, right? So you're being held accountable at a certain level that you just have to be very careful with, right? At State Farm, we're very specific about models that we use, right? 1 in 4 vehicles, 1 in 7 homes we insure, right? There's a lot of data that flows through and there's a lot of decisions that we make based on that data. So if we ingest the wrong model to help us make those decisions, we're going to be held accountable at a high rate. So what I would do in Victor's home behind his laptop just to have
Very
fun,
different.
dealing with Dan out there, you know, trying to see if I can hijack a LLM, that's much different than what I have to bring to State Farm.
Yeah.
Understanding the accountability is going to be different. In the US, we're held accountable by 50 different jurisdictions plus DC,
It's a lot.
right? It's uniqueness in the way that everybody is doing things, right? So you have to stay up to date on law. So you think about, you know, we'll get into jobs and skills, right? There are people out there that's maintaining pretty high-paying jobs just by staying up to date on legislation,
Right.
which is extremely important. But I would say, you know, keep that in mind. There's the personal aspect of what you can do with AI and the ethics around that, whether or not I'm going to allow it to help me cheat on a test. But then there's the corporate aspect, where you're talking about government, companies, et cetera, that there's a role to be played, and you're going to be held accountable for what you're using, even if you didn't create it.
That makes sense. Amit, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I guess the only topic or only point I would add is there has been now also a movement where we could also use AI to monitor AI, right? So if I'm using a model of OpenAI for doing certain things, well, I get a model of Llama 3 or Mistral or whatever, and use that to monitor the responses of that, and then use that to vet out the responses. So I think it could be human and AI that could work together to kind of like keep things safe.
So what I'm hearing, just to summarize, always keep the human in the loop. You can't just defer to AI and let it figure it out. You have to be careful and understand who built the LLM and what biases they might have had, because you're responsible if you use that LLM. And I'll just add on to that, all LLMs are not created equal.
Right.
Some LLMs are good at one thing, another LML is good at another thing. So there almost has to be a cop directing what is the context and which LLM will be the best answer. And just the safety and the security. So I think we all had some good points, right? And I'm going to move on to the next thing. So next one is around the talent. So as you can see, oh, I know what the other point is, maintenance. It's continual maintenance.
continual.
This is not, you know, set it up and, you know, go to lunch, right? You're going to have to maintain these models, or else they're going to degenerate. And I think they call that model drift.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's generating its own data, it's going to be reinforcing its biases and its challenges. So there's going to be a huge demand for these skills. So as AI systems become more advanced and human-like, which is scary, how can businesses harness it? How can we bridge this chasm between fear and mitigating all these risks and actually harnessing it to augment the capabilities? And I'm super passionate about this, that, you know, when we look at implementing AI in any industry, we have to look at the business model and how it will change, not just how do we automate human work. You know, using the example of Amazon, they didn't just go and create a bookstore and do self-service at the teller, right? They looked at how people look for books, content, shop for information, and they used a lot of machine learning to help recommend and to have that grading system, the stars of 1 to 5. They changed the whole industry, and then they changed the whole retail and shopping industry too. So you want to look at the model of the business and not just automating human work. You have to keep the human in the center and then do something that's even bigger and bolder. Before we get back to this, I want to add one more short story about ethics and being safe. So Victor, you talked about, you know, what you do on your own is different than what you do with a company. I was at a conference yesterday with C-levels, and it was about, the gist of the conference was about how do you talk to C-levels, CEOs, boards, and CIOs about AI, and how do you change the business model? And somebody shared on a side note, their network engineer had thought, you know, I think it's time to look at the engineering of the network and make it more secure. Let me see if AI can help my network be more secure. Well, they went out and used ChatGPT, uploaded the documents for all of their network.
Yeah.
And this is the network engineer that's supposed to be keeping everything safe. Guess what? Big sucking sound into the public domain.
Yep.
And so, it's very important when I talk to customers that we look at security first, data security, data governance, creating a safe and quality data estate. And a lot of organizations are data rich and information poor. They haven't really harnessed the power of their data yet. First thing you need to do is get your arms around the data and make sure that it is safe and that there's governance, there's data classification. Yep. So that might sound really boring because the data governance and classification is mostly a business opportunity. The business has to say, what are the rules around this data? It's not like we can go back in our IT cubicle and figure this out. It's a whole organization challenge. But you may also want to think about, from an IT standpoint, restricting the employees to just use an enterprise browser that keeps everything safe inside. That when the employees are looking at ChatGPT, they're in the enterprise version of Copilot or whatever other tools you're using, and that your data that you're trying to improve is not going out to the public domain, because they then had to re-engineer everything, because obviously the bad guys can get that network diagram.
And so if you have an entrepreneurial spirit in the audience and you hear what was just stated, there's a business opportunity there. Because we may look at it and say, oh, that's crazy. Why would someone upload their entire network topology into ChatGPT? But the reality is, a lot of people still don't understand the technology. And we make assumptions based on usage that is just readily available and everybody's knowledgeable and everybody's playing by the same rules. But the reality is, people are just tinkering. Yep. And they don't understand the implications of what they're doing, right? So if your company that you start today was one that can go out there to other organizations and say, hey, I can train your people on how to be responsible with your data, with your information, et cetera, because not everyone has the money in order to enable the internal versions of Azure OpenAI or whatever the case may be, right? So there's business opportunity there. So it's just not for those that are practitioners of AI. It's also for those that are like, hey, I'm on the auxiliary, but I want to get in the game, coach. I can tape. It's those same people who just have a passion and they want to be around it, but maybe they don't have the skill. Carve out a niche for yourself.
So I think we're getting into the fray of talent, right? There's so many roles that either technology or semi-technical folks can play in this new role. So talk to me about what are those roles you think that people should be thinking about and moving towards in training and certifications.
So this is the first thing I will say, just to take a quick step back, right? I mentioned that, at core, I'm software engineering, but I happen to spend 3 years in internal audit. And unfortunately for me, I've been corrupted, right? So the skill set that you need, especially to make waves in this AI landscape, my mind has already been clouded by control, risk, don't do, slap your hand, regulation, legislation. It's been slapped. There's this book, the book series that I love is called The Fear Saga. So if anyone has read that, if you're into sci-fi, very great book. It's on Audible, it's in paperback as well. But in this book, they realized as they were fighting the aliens that the adults didn't have the skill set or the reaction speed to win against the aliens, so they ended up using children. They used children because children were, they didn't fear. They didn't understand the risk associated with they're stronger, they're faster, they're better than us. So what I would say, when we talk about talent, first you have to just strip yourself of everything you think you know. Why do you do that? Because you're going to be less cautious, right? You're going to have the ability to step into this field, open eyes, and maybe invite some things into your life that you wouldn't have before. I'm at a conference currently, and there was a speaker, very, very great speaker, wrote The Medici Effect. So if you know of that book, very good book, but he was the speaker. And he showed a model of the hotel in Zimbabwe that wanted to be built, not hotel, but building that wanted to be built, largest building in Zimbabwe, but they didn't want to use electricity in the building to cool it. Oh. They didn't want to use it to cool it. Oh, how are you going to do this? Largest building, you're in Africa, kind of hot. How do you do this? So they studied termite mounds and how do termites keep their mounds cooled at a particular temperature. and they infused that technology into the building of their structure, and they were able to build it without using electricity for AC.
Wow.
Saved them a tremendous amount of money. Why do I mention that in the framework of this? There's a lot of things you think you know, right? So when we talk about the talent side of it, yes, maybe there's a core technical skill set that could be beneficial, but you're in cyber. I'm pretty sure you've seen plenty of cyber startups led by people with zero cyber skill. So what I don't want people to leave thinking is that, oh, I have to have this core computer science skill set in order to play in the field. What I would say, number one skill set, curiosity.
Yep.
If you're curious, you're going to seek out the knowledge necessary to be proficient. Some of that will lead you to, of course, understanding LLMs and now small language models. It's going to lead you to that. Some of that's going to lead you to playing with Python, to become familiar. Some of it's going to lead you to being able to articulate your viewpoints on AI so that that higher end leader, sitting across from you, know that you're not just fluff. But it starts from a curious place, right? If we put too many guardrails on it, we're not going to go far. So what does that look like? Now, I said all of that to say this. When it comes to the talent field, right? It was mentioned by Amit earlier. He said he started as a statistician. That's the core, right? Understanding models, understanding math, understanding probability, right? That's the core of it. And now understanding how when you push all of the data in, whether it's structured, unstructured, et cetera, like what can that allow you to do from an output standpoint? And companies are looking for that, right? They're looking for you to be able to tell those stories. So if you can do that, that's the start. But I definitely want to, give my colleagues an opportunity to jump in. There's so much around this space that I believe is important, and it's not just those that are developing the technology that should be considered about their talent.
Yeah, I think one thing that I did in my previous company, or we did, that really worked well was we created two different personas. We created a persona of expert and a persona of citizen, data scientist, data engineer, whatever you want to call it, right? And basically we did a lot of pair programming and pair use cases. And where you had an expert on a use case and then a couple of citizen people along with them. And that actually really worked well in many areas for us. We actually amplified the reach of this skill set within the company. That also helped us to change the culture because, right, one of the big obstacles in my area, at least in this whole field of AI, is change management, right? The technology part is easier. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's the changing the mindset of people is the hard part, right? And if you kind of like start with this model where you get people who are experts and create like a center of excellence or right, some group that can be centralized, and then you can get people who are curious, who have desire to learn, who have interest in this, and kind of like combine those two on different use cases. I think you can translate a lot of or transfer a lot of knowledge from these experts into the citizen people.
And if you're engineering expert, I'm going to be honest here. I'm so jealous of citizen data scientists, citizen software engineers who can just take the tools and now input some information, and now they can do the same job that it took me many years to learn. I'm so jealous, but that's a skill set now. Yeah. If you go out and you understand those tools, that you take the time, the low code, no code environments. If you understand that, you can create some pretty unique, special, innovative things, and I'm jealous of you.
Ron?
Yeah. I guess the one thing I would say is what I noticed from my consulting life and even going back through the bureau is like, don't forget the people aspect. And so one of the things that we saw with like a lot of the breaches, like even from my time at the FBI or even going into helping companies basically transform their tech stack or their cybersecurity program, is like the tech team wasn't talking to anybody in the business. Like they didn't have a clue, like they were just working for themselves. They showed up every day, they knew what their job was, but they had no clue what the value prop to the business was. And that impacted their job long term. So one of the things that we always would have a conversation with the exec teams was like, well, the business is like, well, what do you guys do all day? And it's like, well, we do this, we keep you safe and all these other things. But in reality, like, don't forget about the actual people part, like understanding to Ms. point, like what's the use case for what I do every day? Like why am I doing this? What am I securing? Like how is this protecting the bottom line? Because you don't want to be a cost center in any of these jobs, because that's what ends up happening. Even if you have the hottest technology for AI, if the business application of it doesn't exist, then it's pointless. And so they're not going to put more money to it, or when they realize it's like, hey, we're at a cost cutting point right now in time, like we just saw, like after COVID, all the money dried up. Everybody's like, well, what's got to go first? It's like, well, we're going to start cutting here. It's like, what's your value back to the business? So understanding, like being able to talk to people and understand the technical part, or even just being able to relate or have that conversation is critical, one, for your own livelihood throughout your career, but then also making sure your business unit, your team, relevance exists, like when there's tough times or when you're just trying to progress the business forward.
All great points. I love them. I want to key off a couple of things. So I love the termite story because that's going to stick in our minds. If we probably don't remember anything from this, that visual that I have in my head, I'm a visual person, of you looked at something different and then use that lesson to do something. And it reminds me of, I've been in many industries. So before education, I was in 20 plus years in commercial IT. And one of the reasons that I was able to come into education and make such a profound difference, and I'm talking, we turned around failing students and failing schools, we raised graduation rates, we raised test scores, I can go into all the data, but it's because I understood the value of data and analytics. And most people in education were just reporting up to the state. They weren't actually using the data to help students learn. They weren't using the data to show teachers where the gaps were so that they could focus on this gap for that student. So coming in with a different mindset, and I'll tell you, education is a lot like healthcare. If you haven't been in your whole career, if you haven't been a classroom teacher, it's hard to get taken seriously. But I can tell you, coming in with fresh eyes and knowing how to solve problems in 5 other industries, I could say, we need data. We need to see where the students are failing, where they are struggling so that we can turn them around. So that's another example of that termite story. So I want to encourage you that even if you're not in an industry or if you've never used AI before, and it goes back to your story, Amit, that citizen developer mindset, that user mindset, always bring in the person that doesn't know anything about the technology. And is it easy to use? Is it hard? It goes back to me, design thinking. Where's the empathy for the end user? What problem are you really trying to solve? How could you make this experience more frictionless for the user, the consumer, the person? Which goes back to what you're saying, Ron. The human has to be at the center. And I can't emphasize this enough, that we need to keep the people in mind. The change management, as you're talking about, it's always about the people. And I have learned, that's been my lesson for my whole career. It's always about the people, and even more so with AI. So once again, Microsoft did a workforce study. They're doing this every year. The top skills that employers are demanding from their workforce are curiosity, critical thinking, growth mindset, wanting to learn. It's human skills. So I'm part of a movement called human intelligence, and that's the balance to artificial intelligence. So what's going to help us overcome these fears and these challenges? It's our human intelligence. It's our ability to know what question to ask, to know what prompt to give the AI, and to rise above the AI and leverage it as a tool, as a technology, as an assistant, as it's meant to be, because we are way more human than artificial intelligence, and that's our value. So with that, I want to open up to the audience to ask questions, and if you don't ask questions, we'll call on people, because we know some of you.
Okay, I'll bring the mic to you guys, so yeah, put your hands up, and we'll try to get to as many as possible.
Super quick, I love that idea of human intelligence. I was telling my daughters that right now the big term is data science, but by the time they're done with college, it'll be data psychologist.
Yes,
So,
yes, that's
you.
a great point.
So from a management standpoint, why don't we have ChatGPT manage Gemini and Gemini manage ChatGPT? But from a standpoint of social, I'd like to hear anybody's comment on how AI is not going to prevent or stop people from critical thinking. You mentioned this, Serena, but not everybody's as interested in data or information or curious in our society today, especially if you grew up in the COVID time during teenage years. So how do we address that issue with preventing people from saying, well, we're just going to use ChatGPT or Gemini and not have to think for themselves about, oh, well, how does it apply?
So I'll pivot to you, but I'll just say I come at it from an educational standpoint because that's what I've been immersed in for 15 years. And I will not bore you all with my theory of the future of education, but I will say that the system needs to change dramatically because education has been geared for a factory worker, which is not a thinker, which is not a curious person, which is a widget. And we need to create and amplify the gifts and talents of every unique individual. And the educators of now and the future need to be lifting up that talent and creating human intelligence. So how do we do that with the people that have been going through this pandemic and changing it? I'm going to ask my esteemed panel what they think.
I can actually take an example of a actual tool called Khan Academy. I don't know if you heard about it, right?
Love it.
They actually rolled out AI assistants in that tool, right? And I heard Sal Khan in one of the conferences. And if you look at, actually my daughter uses it, so I know it. If you look at the assistants that they have, they don't give you the answers there, right?
It's like the New York City example.
They actually give you help on that, like to make you think about it, right? So they kind of like give you progressive cues to kind of like get to the answer, right? I feel like that's the right model in terms of like how do we leverage AI into education and still enable people to think critically, right? Or still make people think critically. Don't give them the answers, right? And I think
it's more of a Socratic method of dialogue.
Right.
We have to kind of go back to this Socrates.
Yes.
I have a bit of a different view, right? So I think the first component of it is that, yes, I agree with you. It impacts, the cognitive ability to just learn, to interpret, to be considerate of the information that you're given, to validate, to prove out that it's accurate because you're getting it so quick. So for us in the room, we understand, okay, I got this from, let's just say, ChatGPT, Gemini, wherever. I can't trust that it's factually correct. And we also know that there are some of us at our age range that's going to take it and run with it and put it in reports and then get fired because of it. So when we begin to drill down to our kids, right, they haven't matured to a space where they can distrust some of the information that's coming in. So how much of it do they take for fact, right? And how do we monitor that? Now, where I say I differ on like giving answers to the point that was made earlier in regards to we're in a learned education system that's about memory, right? It's not about what you're learning necessarily, it's about what you can remember, which is not promoting innovation, is not promoting critical thinking, because the things you're learning and remembering already exist. So I say, give them the answers, but now with the given answers, let's see what they can create and develop and innovate that doesn't exist, that takes some additional effort to pull out of the baseline, the foundation that you've given them, right? We still have to moderate and ensure, let's just throw the ethical hat on. Let's just say all the information that they're going to gain access to is accurate, true, correct, right? Let's just assume that's so. Okay, give it to them. Like if that helps accelerate them, if that helps my kindergartner start doing software engineering in first grade versus waiting until college, so now they can embrace whatever new version of AI it's going to be by the time they're at this stage, I'm all for it. I'm like, push the envelope, allow it to occur, and let's see what happens.
So you're saying give them the data.
Give it to them.
Available, because AI can't create anything new.
It can't create what's not,
and let
doesn't
them,
exist.
so how do we, that's a big lift for teaching.
So I believe that instead of telling a student, go write an essay on this subject, because they're just going to go to ChatGPT and get it written, they need to say, what's your thesis? What's your hypothesis? What are you trying to prove or disprove? Okay, where are your sources? What's your outline? Just like we had to learn long division in fourth grade before we could use a calculator, now you have to teach the process of creating an argument and expressing it. So if you if you create a workshop where they have to do one thing and show the drafts, show the notes, show, and then stand up and defend it. And I also believe assessment needs to change. We have the bubble sheets with here's the right answer. Yeah. Our assessments need to be show me the work. I don't even care whether the answer is right or wrong. Show me your thought process. Why did you think this was the right or the wrong? You know, so many things have to change. But I feel like we probably have a lot of questions here.
There's more on this side too.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, you can get the next one.
Hi, thank you so much. I think I really appreciate hearing this panel. One of my big kind of takeaways from AI as well has been there's been a lot of use of AI in terms of creating different content and creating art online, which threatens a lot of the validity and a lot of the livelihoods of digital artists to this day. What would be what would be your opinions on that, on regulating as well as just possibly learning to value human creation and more than, and having also having artificial intelligence in tow as well?
Can I answer?
Sure. Yeah.
So I've been thinking about that actually quite a bit, right? And I'll give an example to you, right? Like Spotify, for example, made all the songs available to you at your disposal, right? But you still, when there is a concert, you still go to the concert, right? So I feel like we'll go into a world where the two things will coexist, right? You can get the digital art, like from the AI, but if you want the more authentic stuff, you are still going to go to the human, right? And I think that's where that could be applicable to like many other things. So I feel like, we are seeing that little bit of friction right now, but I think that will change in the future.
I agree. I'll just add that somebody asked me that about marketing. Why do we need marketing people anymore? We can just put it in and get a picture and get the whole brand.
Which is a pretty horrifying question.
It is, but the answer, and I think this made a lot of sense, is, well, instead of sitting around for days and generating 50 different concepts, you can put it into AI, generate 1,000 different concepts, and the people can figure out which ones are the best ones. So it accelerates the process, and it gives you, a bigger universe to choose from.
And your question is very fair, especially as we consider virtual environments, right? So the concert that we go to in the future may not be the concert that we're going to today. So to add regulation to that and to understand what that looks like is important. I don't have the solution for it. I prefer that ownership remain with the creator, but at the same time, I know there's nuance in that. But yeah. Future is going to look pretty interesting.
Thank you so
much. So, excuse me. I'm curious your thoughts on synthetic data and its half-life, right? So, very curious about that.
I think we're going to go to Ron on that.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question. Like, I think is right now, what like AI, basically training AI and creating, that goes back to what we discussed throughout the panel, is like, you're just gonna perpetuate like the flaws within the first data set. So right now they're doing it, but like they can get through maybe one instance of training and then it starts to go off the rails. And yeah, it's gonna get better, but synthetic data from a standpoint of the output is still gonna have issues until it gets more information to train on. So like, what they're starting to do now, because they reached the bowels of the internet, is start creating that synthetic data. But to the other shift is the small language model. Like, why do you need more data? Like when you go to the community, like to Amit's point, getting more data is not going to give you a higher quality output. You actually need to fine tune it, which is basically what we do. Another shameless plug is fine tune it for a specific use case, so it can have a higher quality output. So to me, synthetic data is like, yeah, I know OpenAI, like one of the things that they're starting to do, but when you start looking at the ethical part of how they're starting to do that and what the data sets that all those large language models are trained on, there's a huge, I didn't get into this, but the privacy part of it, like like everybody's data in here, like those user agreements were null and void, basically, for monetary value. So when we started thinking about like what are the root causes to a lot of this, like when we go back to like, oh, how do we want to govern this? Like from a law regulation standpoint, like you should talk to your senator and congressman about privacy, right? Like there should be some level of, in the FBI we talk about the expectation of privacy, like if you have a privacy fence up, there should be some level of expectation of privacy that comes up when you're on the internet now in this new domain or this new space. So I know I took it like way back to where you were thinking, but for me, like the synthetic data is it's going to perpetuate a significant level of problems.
It's going to corrupt the LLM.
Yeah.
Hannah?
All right.
Hi, my name is Vishnath, and I have a question. We all hear about, the dangers of AI, whether AI is going to take over the humanity and all that. But more than that, I think AI is already taking over jobs and is going to take over the jobs. Like earlier, like I have corporate background and now I have my own business, but I know that we usually in corporate world, the work is a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions and all that. Technically, with AI, it's gone. Like you can literally have few meetings, all your notes are already summarized, right? Copilot and all that is there. And then even, let's say, in the projects and all those things which you compile, the ideas, they can be like literally created, discussed and created from very few meetings. And the whole ideation, the whole business requirement document, if you have trained your organization, let's say Amit has background in payer industry, right? So payer, healthcare, insurance companies. If you have your trained LLM co-pilots there, you can literally write even today, I'm not talking 5 years from now, today you can write your business requirement documents from the same, just few, 2-3 meetings. You can write down complete project charters, business requirement documents, project plans, everything. And take it to a stage where developers are ready to understand and architects are ready to understand that, okay, what we can do, only few meetings, right? So what that means is that there'll be less and less, the corporate, the way we see the big buildings and 10,000 peoples, that will be gone very soon. Few people are needed, most probably a lot of people will be working as fractional, right? So they won't need like 30 project managers. One guy can do multiple jobs, or one guy can work in 5 companies like that. So do you see this thing coming up, and do you see that, are we ready for it? Because it's coming very fast.
I have some thoughts, but I will ask you guys.
Loaded.
Do you want to?
Yeah. I have thoughts, but you can hit it first.
Oh, you want to?
You may cover my thoughts. You may cover my thoughts.
Oh, yeah. So, I think from an efficiency standpoint, I think is what we've been discussing here today.
Right.
Like there is going to be a significant increase in efficiency, but like right now it still has a ways to go for where it takes everybody's role over it. Like you're going to have people that manage the AI to what we talked about before. And so yeah, that's going to happen, but there's also going to be a whole new job series or new jobs that are going to be created from that for people to maintain that, for it to continue to be able to do that. But then, yeah, it's going to change. Like I know I had Ed and I had a conversation about like basically it's going to change like what do you value from a human perspective? Like what experiences? We talked about going to a concert being completely different. Like that's what's going to change. It's going to allow you to do something new that you haven't been doing before possibly, or everybody's becoming to like, hey, we're all at our computer screens right now. Like what else is it going to allow us to do? I think I read a quote where someone's like, oh, I want AI to basically fold my clothes and do the dishes so I can do art. Like that's what you want it to be able to, like that's the efficiency that we're all looking for, right? So I completely agree that it's gonna make us, it's gonna take some of our jobs in this room, it's gonna take things that we hate to do and make it easier and more proficient, but then at the same time, like one of the things that I tell like my mentees or whatnot is like, what's gonna happen, what's next? Like how do you reskill? Like what is it that you need to get good at now so you can be a part of that transition or a part of that movement? Is it understanding like coding in different languages, Python? I would say yes. When I'm looking for people to hire as a part of our company, like I went through LinkedIn and it's like, oh, this person they know Python. They didn't know Python, they just had it on their LinkedIn. But reality, like if you actually know it, then that's going to open up doors for you in the future. Something I'm telling my nieces and my daughters all the time. Like how are you going to stay relevant for what's next, right? So we talk about what's on the next of the cusp of quantum computing, or what's next in the AI field? Like, what matters?
And I think that's the gist of what we've been saying through this whole panel, is that yes, the world is shifting dramatically. We've got to keep up. We got to create the future. So
if you're a mentor out there to anyone, right? There are a few things that you want to stress to them. Repurposing of value, like you want to stress that to them, because it's important that they know that with AI, it's just an enabler, right? And it's enabling you to do other things that may bring value to a system that values that other thing. You just have to seek out what that other thing is. The other piece is there is an artistry to getting work done that AI can't replace.
The human skills.
Right. You have to maintain that as much as you can and show the value of it, right? It can only generate based on what already exists, that fed it, that trained it, right? It can't take away the uniqueness of how you can pull together a group and influence change, influence outcomes, influence outputs. When it began to do that, I'm going to fear it, because that's what I do. So we just have to be mindful that there are things that are still within our control, within our command, that we can own, and not fear the fact that it's going to do things that, okay, if it can do it, I probably shouldn't have been doing it anyway.
Right.
You know?
Let's get on some other questions too. I feel like there's so many hands up. I want to give people a chance. What time is it?
What are your thoughts on universal income and all this free time that really AI should be giving us back? You know, instead of us just working harder, doing more difficult things.
Are you watching David Shapiro?
Yeah, like letting it give us, you know, we work 2 days a week now. You know, what are your thoughts on that worldview versus just us digging deeper and deeper? And
so I'm not going to answer it all the way to the political side of it, but what I would say is, like, really, when you go back and look at like time, even like the turn of the 19th century, there was no corporation, right? Like, you worked the farm, you worked in your communities, and so like there's going to be some of that going back to like what actually. So one of the things for me when we talk like from a veteran, like we talk about mental health, and so one of the things that's happened is like, well, people don't work with their hands anymore. So one of the biggest things that when I talk to like different people in the industry is like, well, there's these things that we just don't do anymore that we stopped that we used to do. So we'll go back to the turn of the 19th century. It's like, well, hey, we worked in our communities, we did this, but now we all work where? In a corporate setting. Like I'm running a company, I'm looking for employees. But what I enjoy the most doing is like, no kidding, Ed knows this, like I like to move dirt on my tractor. Like I like to go outside and work with my hands. And so like, those are the things you're gonna start to be able to value more to give you some of that time. I'm not sure so much on universal income. I believe in hard work and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's gonna be some of those things that are gonna exist, but you can look at the tea leaves and see how that goes in some areas where they've tried that. But yeah.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm Leah Siza. I really appreciate how you talked about how important it is to do your due diligence before introducing open source models into your organization, especially like State Farm. Would you all of you could share some 3 to 5 best practices you apply in your evaluation to bringing such models in your organization? I'm going through a similar journey, and top of mind is innovation, but at the same time, I don't want to dig a hole that I have to dig out for. So I would appreciate some practical guideline.
Yeah, so you know, a few items that we focus on, and then I'll transition it to the panel. Can we do it internally? So that's the number one factor, because we understand we have more control over what we're leveraging, you know, especially when it comes to model development versus something that we don't know what went into their models. Secondly, we do a very aggressive interviewing process with those companies to determine, you know, as much as they can share, because again, we understand from a professional to a professional, we're a corporation with many engineers behind us. If you tell us too much, we may not need you anymore, right? So we understand that. So with as much as you can share, you know, how can you guarantee that we're protected? And that leads into our third piece, which is probably the most important thing for any person working in a corporation: contract. Right? we ensure that our contracts indicate very specifically the liabilities of any action that may come against us based on the contracts, the models that you've introduced, right? So if it's something that, wasn't, considered, if it was through negligence of that third party, okay, you're being held accountable to that. And in our space, being held accountable is pretty big, right? Because we're touching so many people, right? But the contract piece is the most important piece, and I would say there's a fear factor in that if you're a third party, because you understand it's not that you're going to be impacted by $100,000 or so. It's going to be much greater. So you should do your due diligence to make sure you've reduced the level of bias within your models. But even internally, we have to do that same thing. We go through committees that review our models, that review inputs, review, how is it impacting other communities. Like, we do a lot to try to protect ourselves, and even in that, there's still fault. Like, we still mess up sometimes.
Yeah, that goes into my question, which is how do we protect ourselves? I'm not so worried about AI taking over the world. I'm worried about people using AI as it currently is to expand their well-being. Yeah. And how do we protect ourselves, or how do we? I mean, each of you are doing good by being up here, and you're representing your companies, which are doing good. Each of us here are doing good in understanding we have a part to play in reducing bias. How do we scale this out to protect ourselves from companies who just don't care about doing good, they care more about doing well?
Right. Thanks for being so patient and waiting. I know you waited a long time for that question. I just want to say that any technology is a tool. And if you read Brad Smith's book, he's the president of Microsoft, a number of years ago, like 10, 12 years ago, he wrote Tools and Weapons. Basically, technology can be used as a tool for good and to assist, or it can be used as a weapon. And there's human intention behind that use. And I don't think AI is any different, only more powerful. So I will turn it to the panel, because it is a scary thought. I mean, it's so much more powerful than anything else. And in the wrong hands with the wrong perspective, those science fiction movies start to seem more real.
Yeah, I guess my answer would be you embrace the right companies that you support, right? I think that would be the best way to kind of like forfeit the people who basically want to do bad things or that don't agree, right? I think you're going to see that separation soon, right? There are companies that are going to be open and be kind of like available to the community, and then there are companies that are going to be closed, right? And they're going to basically be focused on the profit motives, right? So you need to figure out like what you support, right? I'm a big supporter of open source, right? I have benefited a lot in my entire career from that. I have contributed to it. So I think you have to choose your sides, and then that's how we can basically get the good in the society.
What's your name?
Andrew Schillinger.
Andrew, great question. And something I will add on to that, when we think about diverse perspectives, right? The fear that I have, when I think about my wife searching Instagram and she constantly gets the same type of content, and she tells me, oh, this thing is happening so much. And I'm like, I haven't seen it at all, right? The algorithms that's going into that. So when you talk about those companies that are basically force feeding you things that you're interested in, that you're familiar with, that you're excited about, it limits your growth because you're not being exposed to diverse views. You're not being exposed to the other side.
TikTok syndrome.
Right? So the TikTok syndrome. That's the thing I fear most, right? I don't know if you all have seen this trend of people putting out there, like, let's just say it's a picture of Ron out there. And they will put, I'm going to tell my kids, this is Victor Montgomery, right? They put this with professionals, athletes, singers, and that data is being fed to AIs that's now going to begin to produce outputs at some point in the future that's false, right?
It's what I call like a human model drift.
Yeah, and we're allowing that to happen, right? So it's how do you really talk with your dollars and talk with your feet, at least while it still matters, to force people to do and act differently, right? It's a hard lift because I'm guilty. I love LinkedIn, right? It's ease of use, barriers low. I can communicate with a lot of people at once, right? I love what these tools allow me to do, but on the flip side of that, it's also giving me that thing that I like, that I need, and it's not forcing me to grow, which goes back to your very first question around education and things like that. You know, it's not, as an adult, it's not allowing me opportunities to be curious, to grow, because it's giving me things that I'm like, yeah, that's right.
I guess my real question is, how do we scale out mindfulness? How do we scale out being very mindful of this versus, I'm gonna get that dopamine hit and it's the thing that I'm expecting?
So I think some of it goes back to one of the things that we talk about critical thinking,
right.
And this happened a lot like over the last few years when in my previous life we were dealing with basically deep fakes and like even at the lowest level, like someone doing what we used to call virtual kidnappings and all these different crazy things, right? And so I had an example for my analysts, and like the example I would use is basically if I'm getting on 400 in the morning and it's backed up, do I go back to the house? Or do I put on Waze, Google Maps, and Apple Maps to figure out how to get to work? And so that's a simplified version of like critical thinking and processing. But for me, when I'm looking at hiring people, no matter what point I've been in my life, is like, well, I want you to be able to problem solve. And it's the same thing for my daughter too. I'm like, well, so how are you going to think through that problem? Like, how are you going to solve that problem? How are you going to discern what's real and what's not? It's getting harder to do that, which is like when we talk about like how when we go back to regulation and governance of AI, like there's watermarks in what Adobe's doing in some of their work. And so those are the things that needs to be in place. But then there's also like, for me, like for our companies, like how we're trying to figure out now, like from a responsible AI standpoint, is how do we test those models and validate that so you have that level of assurance, and how do you certify it? Like there's organizations that are government adjacent that are building out some of those frameworks to help give some of that assurance long term.
I'll just bring it back around to the hiring talent, the topic. I've hired a lot of people in my day, and CJ knows this. I hire for attitude and aptitude over skills. Skills can be learned. Attitude, a growth mindset, and aptitude, ability to learn, are the things that I look for in somebody. And you can all cultivate those. So you don't need to know. I mean, you guys are super smart. You know so much about this field. They can learn that, right? They can come up to speed on this relatively quickly. So it's the attitude and aptitude. And resumes don't show that necessarily. And even these tools that have been used for decades now to scan resumes don't show the attitude and aptitude. And we need probably some kind of an AI to really get at who is this person? Are they going to be a good fit for this culture? Are they going to do good? Are they going to contribute? Are they going to be good to other people? So I don't have the answer. That's just what I look for. Yeah, it's a good question.
And Ron brought up, oh, I'm sorry. No. Ron brought up an interesting topic that we didn't touch on here, but I'm just going to double down on it, and that's the deep fake topic.
Yes, that's a big topic we didn't touch on.
5G has enabled us to do some amazing things, especially with edge devices. Yeah. Quantum is coming.
Yes, it is.
It's quickly at our doorstep. It's kicking. And when you think about my mother-in-law, she received a call from the IRS that wanted some information from her. Can you imagine if that call came from someone that she knows and it looks like them, it sounds like them, but it's really Ron with a picture over his face and he FaceTimed her to give her that multi-factor authentication, right? And then she just gives over the farm because she trusts him. It's coming, right? So
it's here, especially with the voice.
That's at the door. Yeah.
The voice cloning.
Yeah, the voice cloning is here. You can generate ads with your face, your likeness. Quickly, you can generate hundreds of them that you can push out there to social media for influencers. Like, it's here already, but it's going to become much more common, especially on edge devices, when quantum is more present in our society. So I wanted to throw that out there, not for fear, because I still love all the possibilities of what that can do.
Right.
But the mindfulness of, man, you have to investigate everything. I need a code word with Ron and Amit to say, oh, this is really you. we need our code word, but it's going to be a serious thing.
That's a 40.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to stay around a little if you want to talk informally. So there's a little bit more time.
Yes, yeah, we have the space until 9, so if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to connect with our panelists. Thank you guys all for attending, and thank you to our panelists for being here.
Thank you.